Good morning, church. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I don't know where I'm supposed to stand. Oh, right here. Okay. How's everybody doing today? Good. Sabbath. So today, I kind of want to move quick because it's a very interesting presentation, and we got a lot to cover. So let's start with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for another day of life. Thank you for bringing us here today. I ask that your Spirit would be with us, enlighten our minds, give us the wisdom and understanding that we need. And I just ask that you would just be with there and guide us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So, right now I'm in Andrews University. I'm studying for my MDiv, and I'm emphasizing in archaeology. And one of my emphases in archaeology is Egyptology. And in my studies, I found some very interesting correlations. So in my studies, I found some very interesting correlations between the ancient Egyptian civilization and in the Bible. And these revelations, they're really groundbreaking, and especially in the archaeological community, because when people think of ancient Egypt, we think of polytheism, we think of all the many gods, and we think of all of this. But when you actually get into the root of this ancient African civilization, there's a lot of similarities between the ancient Egyptians and in the Bible. So the title of our presentation today is called the Amen. And so at Andrews University, we have a professor. His name is Dr. Randall Yonkers. This guy is a very, very special person. He's one of and it's crazy because Andrews University, they are one of they're like in the top 3, top 5 for biblical archaeology in the United States. I didn't even know that when I first got there, but they're one of the top. And so this guy, Dr. Randall Yonkers, he's the head of the PhD department, and he's one of the most renowned biblical archaeologists in the world. And he's my mentor. And so this is what he said. He said the Bible is what it is. We already have that. Archaeology is the only source that can add or contribute new light to the Word of God. Because in archaeology, we discover new things every day. History is pretty much what we have, right? But the thing is, every time we find a new archaeological discovery, history changes. So history isn't set. And so the more we find new revelations in archaeology, we're digging up things and we see these types of stuff, it adds new light. It doesn't take away from the Bible, but it's adding new light, new revelation to it. And so this presentation is adding a new light, a new revelation, a different perspective to what we know in the Bible. Because a lot of times we look at the Bible and we can become closed-minded, we can put God in this box. But we have to realize that there's so much more. God is large. And matter of fact, the Bible says in John 10:16, Jesus is like, I have sheep not of this fold. I have other sheep in the sheepfold. And so he was telling this to the Jews because the Jews were, they were like, we're the only ones, but no, they were the special one. But Jesus was like, I got other sheep that I can raise up. And so this is the perspective of one of those sheep in his sheepfold. And it happens to be this ancient African civilization of the ancient Egyptians. So let's go to Revelation. Revelation 1:1-16 says this: the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God had gave him to show his servants, things which must shortly take place, and he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the word of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near. 4. John to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is, and who was, and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before his throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler over the kings of the earth, to him. And so then down to 6, and has made us kings and priests to his God and Father, and him be glory, dominion forever and ever. Amen. Revelation 3:14 says this, and the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things says who? The Amen. The who? The Amen. The faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. So, who's giving this revelation? Jesus, right? Jesus is giving this revelation to John, right? Now, Jesus is changing his identity. He's saying these things says the Amen. So Jesus is using another terminology. Now it's interesting because the Amen, that's a common term, right? Everybody knows what the Amen is, right? At the end of our prayers, we say what? Amen. Amen. You know, when you hear a good song, we're like, oh, amen, amen, right? What's interesting is that the Amen is a common term to us, but it's over 150 to 200 occurrences all throughout the Bible. And it's always used as an adverb. The only time in the Bible the Amen or Amen is used as a noun is when Jesus is identifying himself. And that's very, very important. Remember that, because all throughout the Bible, Amen is used as an adverb. It's always it's at the beginning, it's used as verily, verily, or truly, truly, or at the end to close out. But this one time, all through in the Bible, the one time it's used as a noun is right here, when Jesus is speaking to a certain people. Just follow me. And so of all these names Jesus used, we're familiar with the I am, the light, the truth, the shepherd, the true vine, the way. All these words, Jesus is speaking to who? The Jews. And he's using all of these identities to identify himself with. Why? Because they were familiar with this, right? They were familiar with all these things. So the Amen is an uncommon name that Jesus identifies him with, but he's not speaking to the Jews, right? He's speaking to the 7 churches. So where else do we see in the Bible or history where God is called Amen? Well, in order to answer that, we can just get the historical context of the 7 churches and what the Bible talks about. So who are these intended receivers? You see, because when Jesus is saying this revelation, he's speaking to certain people. And so in order for us to understand why he finally just uses this new word or this new title for him, we have to understand the history of these people. Who are the intended receivers of the revelation of Jesus? Because a lot of times when we look at Revelation, we look at it from the prophetic sense, when it's speaking to us nowadays. But remember, when this revelation was given around, 90 AD, this was given to a people at that time to understand. So a lot of times we skip over that and we look at Revelation according to us in the last days. But it had a dual aspect to it. So during this time, John is to give John to the 7 churches which are in Asia. So right here, the Bible is telling us that this message that Jesus is giving to John, it's for him to give to these people in Asia Minor, the 7 churches. As we see all right here. All these 7 churches we're very familiar with. Send it unto the 7 churches which are in Asia. So who are these 7 churches of Asia Minor? This is where Asia Minor is. You see the Aegean Sea right across. You see all these islands. These are the 7 churches. So who were these people of Asia Minor? Little glimpse of that. This is the Mediterranean Sea right here. This was the most popular. This was like America nowadays, or back then, this was like the whole America where everybody would come. Most popular region in the ancient world. But what's most interesting is that who were they culturally and religiously influenced by? The people of Asia Minor. So Asia Minor, during this time period, around this time period, the most important place in the ancient world was Egypt. Egypt was like the Mecca. Egypt was the superpower at that time. It was what America is. Everybody comes vacation from outside our country. Everybody comes to America to visit. Egypt was the America of the ancient world. And right here is Alexandria. Now, during this time period, everybody in the whole entire world would come visit Alexandria. And so it's known in history how when people would come to Alexandria was known for the famous library. And in this library of Alexandria, it had every single wisdom of the ancient world. It had every knowledge of every single civilization, every tribe, every culture at that time. It had every single knowledge of it. Because when the whole world would come, people from ancient America, from South America, and all over the world, from Asia up to Russia, when they come visit in port, land in port, it was required for them, whenever new people would come, it was required for them to give a history of their civilization. So this location right here in the ancient world had every knowledge of every single tribe and every single civilization here. So it was a storehouse of all wisdom. So everybody would come here, and not only that, but it had the first universities. This is where everybody would come, especially in this region, the Mediterranean Sea. Everybody would come here to learn about physics, to learn about medicine, to learn about geometry, astronomy. All of these things, people would come here to learn. It was like, for doctors, this was like med school for them. You had to go to med school in order to become a doctor. For pastors, you got to go to Andrews and get your MDiv. And so this is where everybody came to learn any type of science or special knowledge or whatever, especially religion. They would come here. And so the intended receivers of revelation were influenced by the Egyptian culture. And it was a nice little boat ride that they would just take right here. They would do day trips. Every day we'll come there. And Alexandria, that was the most famous city in the world. It was filled with temples, theaters, libraries. And then the universities that I was telling you about, it was called Per Word. This is an Egyptian word, Per Word. Per in Egyptian means house. Word is the ancient Egyptian word for wise. And so together it would be called the House of the Wise. So universities, these were the first universities of the world. And they were called Per Word, House of the Wise, or the House of Wisdom. And so the Egyptians' goal for these universities was to repopulate humanity after the flood. And it wasn't their goal just to educate their civilization, but it was open for every single civilization culture in the world. And this is why everybody from all over the world would come to Alexandria House and to the Per Word and learn. This was the first university. And that's important because now the people of Asia Minor, when they went to Egypt and they first learned about who was the creator, who was the one who spoke everything into existence and who created everything that we see. Well, they went to Egypt and the Egyptians told them it was the Amen. You see, according to the ancient Egyptians, the one, and that's why Jesus identified himself as the Amen to these people of Asia Minor. So who's the Amen to the people of Asia Minor? Put yourself in their shoes. When they're first learning about who's the creator of life, who did all of this, this is what they understood. The Amen that the Asia Minor knew was this. He was the creator who spoke all of everything into existence. And we're going to go more into details of this later. I'm going to show you. It's going to blow your mind. The similarities from when we read in the Bible of the creator and how the Egyptians perceived the creator. Very similar. And so the Amen that the Asia Minor knew was the creator who spoke everything into existence, the Amen. And so Jesus, think about it. The creator spoke everything into existence. So Jesus identifies himself as the Amen to the people of Asia Minor as a point of reference. So the point of reference kind of works like this. When a divine message is trying to reach human receivers, you can't just come straight across because the language of heaven is different from the language of humanity. So how can God give a divine message, the language of heaven, the language of pureness? How can it reach a people who are so steeped and soaked in sin and they don't know anything outside of death, disease, and destruction? How can God speak to humanity and let them understand these heavenly principles? He has to have some type of common ground. He has to have some type of point of reference where that the two parties can understand. So this is why Jesus came down and he was speaking parables. He would come down in heaven and the parables were these divine principles. And Jesus found out the best way for me to get these people to understand it, let me use what they're familiar with. And so all these parables were what? It was agriculture. Consider the lilies, the wheat and the tare. All these things Jesus used to teach these people were these common ground, point of reference. So now Jesus is speaking to people outside, to another sheep in his fold. And he has to use terminology that they're familiar with. You see, because we think that God is just set, but God changes for us. With the way he speaks to us, the way he reveals himself, this is called progressive revelation. So as time goes on and humanity changes, God changes the way he reveals himself to us. In the beginning, it was through nature, and in time, it was through the prophets. Now, then when Christ came, he said, I'm coming directly to you. And so God gives us different revelations to meet our standards, to meet our needs. He adapts to us and helps us understand him more. And so when Jesus is speaking to the people of Asia Minor, he has to use words that they're familiar with. So now instead of saying, I'm the light, I am the way, I am the door, I am the good shepherd, he says, I'm the Amen. I'm the Amen that you learned about when you studied in ancient Egypt, about the Creator who spoke everything into existence. He said, that's me. So now the people of Asia Minor are like, we just got a direct message from the Creator. The book of Revelation, this revelation that the Christ gave John, the people, he gives it to these 7 churches, and they read it, and it says, these things says the what? The Amen. So now these people in Asia Minor are like, whoa, we got a direct message from the Creator. So Jesus has to use a word that be like, this is not from John, this is from me. This is the Creator who spoke everything into existence. And so he uses the word Amen as a point of reference. So now, you see what I'm trying to say is how Jesus is using the Amen to identify himself with the same Amen of ancient Egypt. But there's some things we have to work out because we need more evidence. We can't just say, okay, Jesus says I'm the Amen, he's the Amen of the same as Egyptians, but there has to be some evidence. So is there any archaeological or biblical evidence that supports Jesus the Amen being the same Amen who revealed himself to the ancient Egyptians? And it's interesting, there is. So this is a biblical perspective of ancient Egypt, and we're going to take a biblical perspective to history. And so everybody's familiar with Genesis 10, after the flood, right? After the flood, Genesis 10 talks about how Noah's sons repopulate humanity. We see the genealogy of the repopulation of civilization. And so as Noah's sons repopulate humanity, Noah has 3 sons. And remember, these 3 sons lived in the antediluvian world. And as they came over, we know Japhet goes up to the whole European area, all the way to the Indus Valley. Shem goes to Mesopotamia, but Ham goes to Africa. And as Ham locates in Africa, he has 4 sons. One of his sons' name is what? Mizraim. Mizraim is the Hebrew word for Egypt. So think about this. Look at this. This is the Bible laying out history. The Bible is saying that that Egypt was established by a son of who? A son of Ham. The Bible is saying that Mizraim, which is Egypt, was a son of Ham, who was a descendant of Adam. So therefore, if the Bible is saying that, if Mizraim is a son of Ham, he's a descendant of Adam, there should be the establishment, the root, the foundation of ancient Egypt should have some correlation, or there should be some evidence of monotheism, the worship of the same creator as Adam, knowledge of the fall of humanity, knowledge of the Garden of Eden, and most importantly, the prophecy of the coming Messiah. Because think about it, after the flood, what was the most important thing on everybody's mind? When's the Messiah coming? The whole antediluvian period, after the Garden of Eden, the one thing on everybody's mind is, when is the Messiah coming? That prophecy in Genesis 3:15, when is the Messiah coming? And so this was on everybody's mind. When is Christ coming? When is he coming? To reconcile humanity and divinity. And so, if Mizraim is a son of Ham, Egypt's foundation should have monotheism. We should find any of these evidence right here. And it's interesting, there are evidence. It's archaeological, it's an ancient Egyptian connection that connects all of that. Now I'm going to break this down. Watch this. So this right here is called the Heavenly Cow myth. The myth is pretty much just like when we read the books of the Bible. It's like the history of it. This is like what it means when it says myth. So the Heavenly Cow myth says this. I'm going to break it down because it's a very lengthy, on a papyrus in the hieroglyphs. It's very lengthy. So I'm going to summarize it real quick. But first I want to break down to what Heavenly Cow means. So the Egyptians wrote in hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs are symbols that they use for words. So their symbols were actual words. So when we look and we see an animal, or we see one of these, those are words, not actual gods or whatever like that. These are just words for us. So the cow to the ancient Egyptians represented a source of nurturement, because the cow was one of the most important animals to a pastoral agriculture community, because the cow gives milk, it gives meat, and all of that. So it was a symbol of nourishment. Now, heavenly cow, that means the cow's in the heaven, and that's how they drew it for their words. So the heavenly cow in the sky represent the heavens nourishes humanity. That's what that was a symbol of. It was talking about that the heavens nourish humanity, and it had dual aspects where, what does the sky do? The rain comes down, just like a cow gives milk and it nourishes the calf, rain comes down and nourishes the crops to grow. So that's what the symbol of was. So the heavenly cow represented the divine, it represented heaven and humanity. Now there's a picture, I forgot to put it up here, but there's a plaque that shows the heavenly cow, and then the Egyptians reaching up and touching the cow, which symbolizes divine and humanity union. The union of the divinity and humanity. And that's what it represented. It was a union that they had with the divine. And so in the heavenly cow myth, I'm going to break it down. This breaks it down like this. In the heavenly cow myth, it states this. It talks about the fall of humanity. And because the fall of humanity, the divinity and humanity separate. And because divinity and humanity separate, a portion of humanity rebels against the divine. And because humanity rebelled against the divine, a great flood covered the whole entire world. That's right here what this talks about. In that whole entire myth, it talks about all of those things, which we're very familiar with. What in the book of Genesis, the fall of humanity, divinity, divine, the separation. Adam and Eve got to leave the Garden of Eden. Humanity, divine separates, and then what happens in Antilucor? It was a rebellion. Genesis 6, the rebellion took place, and then what? Because the rebellion, what happened? It was so bad that what? God had to bring the flood. That's all this talks about right here. Same exact thing. Next, because humanity and divinity separate, there's this next tale that they talk about. It's called the divine child king. Because humanity and divinity separate, they said that the Creator would incarnate as a child, become a king, and restore humanity and divinity. That's what it talks about right here. And then next, they have this thing called the Egyptians' religion was called the mysteries. They called it the mysteries. And it's interesting because you guys are familiar with Ellen White when she talks about the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. What took place? Angels. She said angels came down and taught humanity, or taught Adam and Eve, right? Taught them the mysteries of heaven and the mysteries of earth. And the ancient Egyptians called their religion, and their religion also incorporated the sciences and all of that. They said that the same exact thing. They called it after that. The same knowledge that the angels taught them, they called it that. Now, this is really interesting because this is the hieroglyphs, and when you translate it, this is what it says. And this is the oath that the priest had to take. And this is what they stated. Listen to this. The priest would say this: I have made my way. Before a priest could become a priest, he had to make the initiation. He would say, I have made my way by way of the tree of life. Now I have entered into the sacred mysteries and sailed forth the right and truth. And so it was the goal of the priest. What they had to do was, I have made my way by the way of the tree of life. What does that mean? What is the way of the tree of life? The same way when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, that way, the sinless nature or the perfection, the union with God, the priest, in order to him become, he had to have that union, the same way that humanity lived in the Garden of Eden, by way of the tree of life. So they had knowledge of the tree of life, and it says, now that I have aligned myself with the divine, now I can go forth in truth and right, and I can teach others. That was the purpose of this. So based on the biblical and archaeological evidence, it's evident why Jesus identified himself as the Amen of Egypt, but there's more. So if the Amen of the Bible and Egypt are the same, how do we address the many gods of Egypt and polytheism? So is there a case for monotheism in ancient Egypt? Because that's important, because we see these, many gods, we see these many deities in ancient Egypt. But one thing we have to understand is this, that there's two great periods of ancient Egypt. The first period, and it's hard to see over here, but the first period, when Egypt was established by Mizraim, they were monotheistic. Then there was a bridge where they actually did become polytheistic. but it wasn't the original Africans. These people at this time were monotheistic. They were pure ancient Egyptians. This was the African tribe, but then they didn't become polytheistic until what? Until they started getting conquered. First conquered by Canaanites. This was around the time of Joseph. Remember when in the Bible and this is another reason why Jesus gave Jacob that name Israel, because he wanted they were Canaanites. He wanted to separate them from the Canaanites. So when Joseph brought his family down, remember the Bible says there was more people that came. These people were called the Hyksos. And they were the first to conquer Egypt. The ancient Egyptians allowed them, because of the famine, allowed them to come into their land, nourish it until whatever they did. And Egypt often did that. They often let people come into their land and just regain and get back on their feet until they're ready to leave. Hyksos first these Canaanites conquered Egypt, and then all the way down to Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans. During this time, this is the period the Bible only talks about ancient Egypt. It doesn't talk about this period. And so during this time period, that's when they became polytheistic, because they were conquered by foreigners who altered the religion. But during this time, they were monotheistic, and there's archaeological evidence for that. So the Amen means the hidden one. So and this is amazing, the ancient Egyptians knew that the creators of the universe, the one who spoke everything into existence, they knew him as the hidden one. Now check this out. The ancients said because he was the Amen, he is he who has no image. It was a law in ancient Egypt where there could be no image made of the Creator. Doesn't that sound like one of their commandments? They were not allowed to make an image of the Amen. Why? Because he has no image. He's the hidden one. And the Jews actually, they called God the hidden God. They will call him the hidden God because no man has seen him. And so there is a connection to Amen. He had no image. And it was a law in ancient Egypt not to make an image, the hidden one. Amen in Egypt means hidden one. Now, this is very important because there's these two words. It's called neter. This is how you pronounce it. This is neter, and then neterui. These two words are very essential to breaking down what does it mean by the eternal creator and then these other gods that we see. So anytime the ancient Egyptians referred to the eternal creator, they would say neter. They would always say neter to refer to the eternal creator, the supreme source, the one who spoke into existence, neter. Anytime you see these other gods, they were called neterui. Now what are those? Those other deities weren't individual gods. They were just attributes of the neter. They were all, you know how like we saw El Shaddai, Jehovah Nissi, right? We have all these other names for God based upon his what? His attribute. What he provides us with. And that's what the ancient Egyptians understood as these other gods were. Now when they were conquered by foreigners, the foreigners did not understand the individualness. They made these attributes into gods. Because the priest, when they conquered Egypt, the priest did not tell them. They took an oath not to tell the profane the mysteries of God or their religion. Because they knew that the ancient world, these profane people were perverted. And so when these foreigners took over Egypt, they turned these attributes of God into individual gods for profit and for gain. And so the Africans, they knew that the Neterui, these other gods that you want to call it, were just attributes and divine aspects of the one divine God. And so the Hebrew names for the divine one, the Egyptian many gods, and it's like a facet of a diamond. Like for the ancient Egyptian, God was like a diamond, and the diamond has different facets, and all these different facets were just aspects of that one diamond, different perspectives of it, and that's how they viewed it. And it's similar to we see in the book of Proverbs, how the personifications of wisdom, that's the same exact thing. This is really amazing right here. So neter is what? The neter is what the Egyptians call God, the eternal creator, right? Now check this out. This is the symbol. This was the hieroglyph for when they, like how we would write out Jesus or God. This is them writing out neter or the eternal creator. What's amazing is that they identified in the hieroglyph the eternal creator as three. This was the symbol for the eternal creator. Why would they have three? Why did they just do one, right? They understood the triune aspect of the creator. Every one of their symbols talk about it, especially this one right here. Look at the three up at the top. The three right here, and this symbol right here, they have three sides right here. And then this one, they have three flares. And think about it. Look how they understood that the eternal creator was the Most High. And so they put the three at the top of the hieroglyph to represent the Most High is three in one. One staff, but three, he's three in one. So they understood the triune aspect of the divine. And these are different ways. When you read ancient Egyptian literature and all of that, you see all these different writings for him. And this is all different words for the Amen, based upon his movement or his phases or the way he acts. They have different ways of spelling it, especially over time. You know, words, the way you spell stuff changes over the time period. And so Atem, Tim, Atum, Atum, all of them are the same as the Amen. Now watch this. I'm about to read some. This right here is from this is hieroglyphs and papyrus from the beginning of ancient Egypt. This is around 3000 BC, which you're about to read. When Egypt, it was in the two great periods. This is the period when they were monotheistic. Listen how they write about the creator. Tim, or Amen, as we're saying. Tim saying, from being God, one I became three. This is in the pyramid text. This is Tim, so this is God speaking to the ancient Egyptians. He's saying, Tim, or Amen, saying, from being God, one I became three. Then right here, God is one. This is the ancient Egyptians. God is one. They say God is one. God is one and only, and none other exists with him. This is the ancient Egyptians saying this. When people say, oh, they're polytheistic, they believe, this is from their mouth. This is written in stone right now, engraved in stone in hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt, even today. God is one and only, and none other exists with him. God is the one who had made all things. God is a spirit, a hidden spirit, the spirit of spirits. Wow. This is them talking about the creator. Another one. This is a hieroglyph right here. This is the shrine of Ta'akamun or Ta'akamen. Then it came. This is what he said. Then it came to pass that the majesty of Amun or Amen, who came into being by himself. So they understood that the Creator came into being by his own might, by his own power. They understood, like even now in the theological field, we still wrestle with how did the Creator come into being? Like we didn't understand it, but they knew back then, around 3000, 4000 BC, they understood that the Creator of everything came into being by himself, by his own power. And they knew that he had no beginning. And here was another hieroglyph. This is the Creator speaking. He says, I coming forth am Amen, the hidden one, pure of heart, within the pure body, I live through my word. The ancient Egyptians also called the Amen the word, because he spoke everything into existence. Just like we read in John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. We know Christ as the one who spoke all this into existence. This is Christ speaking to the ancient Egyptians and saying, I coming forth am Amen, the hidden one. I live through my word. And so the Amen to the ancient Egyptian was the logos of creation. Check this out. This is the Memphis creation story. This right here is very amazing because you guys got to understand the reason why it's so similar, and you'll see it, the reason why it's so similar to when we read the creation story in the Bible. Who was Moses? Moses was the author of Genesis, right? Moses was what? He was an Egyptian.
Right.
The Bible doesn't talk about his upbringing in Egypt, but Moses was an Egyptian. And not only that, but Paul says, I think in Acts 7 or 14, Paul says that Moses was wise. He was engrossed in all the wisdom and knowledge of ancient Egypt. He had all the wisdom and knowledge of ancient Egypt. And the reason why we see Moses, who was around 1450 BC, the ancient Egyptians got this around 3000 BC or probably even further. But the reason the similarities is because the same God that revealed the creation to Moses revealed it to the ancient Egyptians, who were one of his people at that time. That's why you see the similarities. So my defense, the reason why I did this presentation is because in the archaeological community, I'm always reading books where it's talking about how Christianity, because all historians, they say Christianity is a counterfeit of ancient Egypt. Because you see so many similarities with Christ and Horus, you see the comparison between the creation stories. Historians right now in the archaeological community believe that Christianity is a counterfeit of the ancient Egyptian religion. So my defense, my knowledge, and my revelation, what I've done, it showed the reason why they have a union is because the same person who inspired the Christians and the Jews was the same one who gave the same revelation to the ancient Egyptians at a period of time. And so I'm convinced in the archaeological community that Christianity is no counterfeit. It's a continuation. Christ didn't come to start a new religion. He just came to restore what was broken. And so what I'm trying to do is convince and restore the trueness of the Christianity and the ancient Egyptian culture. Now check this out right here. This is the creation myth. This is their creation story, like what we've read in Genesis of the creation. Watch this. In pre-creation or chaos, Ptah, which is the African word, some of you might be familiar with this. Ptah just means the source, like the body of everything. When you think of the universe, the body of everything is Ptah. The supreme source emerges from the primeval waters or none, or from just the spirit world, in the form of a hill in the risen land physical world. Then Amen immediately unites with Ptah by emerging also from the chaotic waters of none and sitting upon him. So what this is just saying is, pretty much what it's talking about is how, and you'll see from another creation, Ptah and Amen, remember we saw the symbol for Neter? It was 3 in 1. Yeah. They understood the triune aspect of the Creator. So Ptah, Amen, and when we see Ptah, Amen, and Ra were all just one. It was just different phases of creation that they had. Just like the Trinity, we see they are 3 individual, but they have 3 different purposes and functions. And so you'll see the same thing here, because when Ptah thinks of everything that he wants to create, he opens up his mouth and Amen speaks, who is the Word. And you can see that same type of union, that same creation that we see in our Bible. So after Ptah and Amen join together, the divine union, Ptah conceives in his heart everything that he desires to exist. This was the beginning of order and arrangement of creation. And so the gods Ptah and Amen, who are actually just one, of order and arrangement, and represent as the follows. The same first pairs of creation, pre-creation. Gods are together, present Ptah who is thought in the word of all gods, together with Amen, who rests upon the Ptah. So this just shows the divine union of how, and it gives a more detailed aspect of creation, like the formula, how everything came into existence. So the Amen, having absorbed the thought and creative power of Ptah, then proceeds with the work of creation. It is now clear that by making contact with Ptah, Amen immediately received the attributes of Ptah's creative thought and speech and omnipotence and became the instrument and the logos and the demerge through whom the task of creation was undertaken and completed. So all that just broken down is just summarized. But in the creation myth, they pretty much say that Ptah, or we would say God the Father, and the Amen working together in unity to bring creation. Everything that God the Father wanted to create, the Amen did what? Christ spoke it into existence. And they have that same knowledge. Because remember, the foundation of ancient Egypt was from a son of Ham, who was a descendant of Adam. So when this was written, when Egypt was established, this was established with the creation. And it came from Adam. Because remember, Ham lived in the antediluvian world. And so remember, Adam, when he left the Garden of Eden, you think he didn't tell them about everything that took place and the beauties of the Garden of Eden and all the knowledge of all this? So they had knowledge of everything. The angels tell him, think of Adam. Adam would probably ask, God, how did you create everything? What took place? And so you think Adam, after he left the garden, was telling all his lineage of what took place. Noah's sons experienced the antediluvian world and all of that knowledge. And so when he, of course, think about it, they're in the boat, and even after, they're telling stories constantly of what took place in the Garden of Eden, how everything came into existence. So when Mizraim establishes Egypt, all of this knowledge is just trickled down from Adam. from those same stories. Because the Bible says that. This is where the Bible was sent. And so, in closing, you can see the comparisons between the Amen according to the Egyptians and Amen according to Christianity. In Christianity, Jesus, who gave the revelation to John, identified himself as the Amen. And we know that Christ before, he was the hidden one. In the Old Testament, God didn't reveal himself in flesh. So he was considered the hidden one. And so the hidden one to the ancient Egyptians was the same thing, Amen. And then when you see the word Amen Ra, that just simply means the hidden one manifested. That's all that simply means. Because now when we look at Egyptology, we study Egypt, what you're actually studying is a Eurocentric perspective of, these are the Europeans trying to interpret what they think the Egyptians were. But this right here is an Afrocentric perspective of the Egyptians. And they believe that the Amen, who was the hidden one, Amen Ra, represented just the hidden one manifested, which was that prophecy of when the Messiah was to come. And so Jesus is considered the Word. The Amen was the Word as we see in creation, who spoke everything into existence. According to Jesus, the Amen, the true and faithful, Jesus called himself in Revelation 3:14. He said, I am the Amen, the true and faithful. Well, look at this. And when you read Egyptian, when you read the hieroglyphs and poems and hymns, kind of like our Psalms, the Amen says, I am the Amen, I am Lord of Ma'at. Ma'at is the African word for divine order, divine harmony, and it also represents truth and faithfulness. So the Amen in ancient hieroglyphs or in ancient poems and hymns, he says, I am the Amen, the Lord of Ma'at, the Lord of truth, the Lord of faithfulness. And then we both see the Creator, the Amen, the Creator, and the Creator of the Amen as well. And so this whole thing, the reason why I brought this presentation is because when we're reading the Bible, when we're studying, constantly studying in religion, we have to understand that God is much larger. He's much larger than, what we just see in the Bible. There's other people and there's other sheep, and they have different perspectives of God. And so we have to consider, when we're studying, when we're learning about God, it's important for us to gain that perspective of other people and their knowledge and their view of God. And so this is my presentation, and this is a book that I'm writing right now, which goes into much more details of what I'm working on, and this is the cover for the book. And so I just wanted to present to you today a dynamic aspect of God and our Creator, and showing, especially from our ancestors, our heritage, the African heritage, and how we perceive God in the ancient world, and to kind of remove that stigma of how the ancient Egyptians, who were ancient Africans, were polytheistic and were they savages, as people will call them, or pagan, but they were descendants of Adam, and they established this and had the same establishment and understanding that we have in the Bible. Thank you. Amen.